Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new Rambling with Ramble Pack. And I got with me a very special guest today. I've been following his channel for a long time. He is very busy. He's a very busy person, but he and I have chatted for a little bit on and off the past several years. PostMesmeric, do you want me to call you by your name, by the way?
Alex is fine, yeah.
Alex is fine. Okay. Post Mesmeric, also known as Alex. Now, for those that watch this stream or VOD that may not be aware, can you explain yourself and your channel?
Yeah, I'm Alex, PostMesmeric on YouTube. I've been doing, I guess you could call them video essays for quite a long time. It's been almost 9 years, almost. Yeah, I think August is 9 years. I just like talking about video games. Originally I kind of got started talking specifically on the design side. But over time, I've just kind of, relaxed my structure, wanted to talk specifically about just games I like, games I think are interesting. Yeah, it's really just something I like doing. I like talking about the medium. I like seeing how certain aspects of it, whether it's the design, the music, the graphic direction, the story, anything that I can really consider super interesting is something I like to point out in a lot of the videos that I make on my channel.
Excellent. Now, normally in podcasts, people ask, what have you been working on at the end of the video? I'd rather start at the beginning. What kind of things have you been working on lately? Like, what should people be expecting on your channel if they subscribe?
Well, the last thing that I worked on was Donkey Kong month is something that I've been doing for quite a long time, where every April I would release a video specifically about a Donkey Kong game, whether it's Donkey Kong Country, whether it's one of the newer ones, whether it's a spin-off, whatever. But with that kind of wrapped up, I have some other projects that I'm working on. I usually like to keep it under wraps a little bit. Like I kind of talk about this. I kind of talk. I know, but I kind of talk about these things more on the Patreon side, and I hate to plug that so early, but that's. But there are some games that one thing I've kind of been pretty distinct of is just kind of playing games that I really may have missed the first time around. Like I know that there's a lot of games out there that people consider classics. They consider them, the rite of passage, the games that you need to play before anything else. And there are a lot of those. I think that I'm finding a lot of just playing these legendary games for the first time gives me a sort of perspective that a lot of people may have overlooked because they've just kind of been romanticized so much. One of the videos that seems to have gotten a lot of input is the video that I did where sort of documented my first time playing through Dark Souls 1. That was something that I thought was really fun. I kind of liked the format that I did for that. And I would like to do another video like that on a different game. And I am sort of contemplating how to make that happen right now.
Well, that one's especially interesting because I did really enjoy that video, but more so in reflection of one of your earliest videos I remember watching was where you talked about Bloodborne and why you would never finish it. Like it was your favorite game or one of your favorite games of the year, but I think you got to Father Gascoigne and then after that you didn't play further.
Oh yeah, that was in a video I did about gaming with obsessive compulsive disorder because that is something that that's a really important video to me, and I did mention in that video that I enjoyed Bloodborne. I liked Bloodborne a lot. I think that I can definitely see a lot of the appeal, but because I'm trying to think the best way to put this is just I don't like getting to a point where I can't progress. Like it kind of bothers me mentally because of my obsessive compulsive disorder. But the more I kind of thought about that, it's like I need to be in a place where if I am able to pick up the game again, I can just move forward. I don't want to hit a wall and then just stop, which is kind of how I felt with Bloodborne. But honestly, kind of looking at that video and also the Dark Souls video, like I think there's a lot of potential there to continue to explore the I guess the Soulsborne from software catalog, and Bloodborne is definitely something that I think deserves getting more attention in my uh, I guess my gaming log right now. Yeah.
Well, it's also especially interesting to me for a couple of reasons. One being that what sets Bloodborne and Dark Souls apart in this regard, but at the same time, because I remember watching that video, because you know how people will always say stuff like, oh, I've got to hit every icon on the map, I'm so OCD, or oh, I've got to alphabetize every one of my movies on my shelf, I'm so OCD. And it's like, what you describe, your experience in that video, is beyond what people think of as being OCD. And it was very educational, very informative, and it's actually one of those things that I do wonder about once in a while when it comes to this game seems like something that might be up his alley, but how does living and gaming with OCD impact the experience of that?
Yeah, the Bloodborne situation was something that I don't think a lot of other people think about. A lot of the comments that I got on the OCD video is like, I have to check out everything on the map. I have to, organize my inventory in a very specific way. And that is a way to express that, OCD is a part of your life. I think the reason that I wanted to make that video is because there are a lot of videos out there that, mental health is a very important subject to a lot of people on YouTube. Maybe they have depression, maybe they have anxiety, maybe they have bipolar, but OCD really wasn't anything. It didn't seem to get as much visibility as not to say that the other mental health subjects are not worth talking about. I absolutely think that they're worth talking about, but OCD just kind of felt a little bit underrepresented and underdiscussed, which is, as someone who was formally diagnosed like medically with that condition, it was just kind of something that came to my mind and something that I thought was worth covering in that way.
And it is, I should add that to my links below in the description because I have made note of things like your Donkey Kong month. Your Danganronpa video, I imagine, is one of your most popular. But that OCD video was an excellent one, and I think it's valuable. But not to harp on that too long, so let's get to the main topic of Summer Game Fest. And my first question is actually less about Summer Game Fest, this year's Summer Game Fest specifically, and more, what are your thoughts on Summer Game Fest in comparison to E3 of the past, if you've followed these very much in the past yourself?
Yeah, E3 in general, I've been tracking that big event as long as I can remember. I remember it coming up every now and then, when you're like I was a subscriber to Nintendo Power, and they would always have that talking about that every summer. A lot of the gaming websites that I frequented back in the day, they would always have big celebrations, big coverage blowouts about E3. And it was exciting. It was, at the time, it was definitely, showing that you got all these new games on the horizon. And there's a lot of things to get excited about. I think that, there's definitely a level of anticipation when you see something that you think you're really enthusiastic to play. And when over time, it might have been around it, I can't say for sure, but I know around the time that Nintendo started doing Nintendo Directs and sort of doing their own thing in comparison to this big convention or big conference with E3, that was kind of interesting because it's like it was kind of showing everybody that, we don't really need E3. We can have these little news breakdowns, these announcements at any time during the year. And as Nintendo kind of continued doing that and more publishers were starting to bounce out of E3, it was kind of the writing on the wall. It was showing everybody that we don't need to centralize all of these events all of these announcements at a single event. And to an extent, I think that the Nintendo Direct, and now we have like the state of play. We have Microsoft doing Xbox showcases. We have all these publishers kind of doing their own version of the Nintendo Direct. So seeing Summer Game Fest kind of pop up as this, I don't want to say successor to E3 but it very much is the same sort of vibe. It definitely feels like E3, like I guess it's like the next generation of E3 in a way. Um, it really does. I see a lot of people discussing like, is Summer Game Fest the replacement for E3? Because it definitely feels like that to a lot of people. But there's something about Summer Game Fest that just doesn't have the same magnitude of E3. Something about it just seems like it's trying to be E3, but the excitement just isn't quite there. It's hard to explain, but that's kind of what I envision as Summer Game Fest.
I think because there's no unification in Summer Game Fest.
I think that's a good point. Yes.
There's a coincidental number of events that are timed around then. But if this were E3, like if Summer Game Fest were still E3, we would have had the latest Nintendo Direct. It would have been this Tuesday, as some people were trying to predict.
Hmm.
Instead, the new prediction is going to be this upcoming Tuesday, the 18th, but who knows if it's even going to be that, right? There was unification where everybody was releasing their information at once during E3, and now we had certain developers starting in May. And this was
Hmm.
start and as to your point though, this was starting in the Xbox sorry, not the Xbox, the E3 era when we were starting to have the Nintendo Direct. We were starting to have the Nintendo Direct. Konami was also early on to team up with Mega 64 and do their presentations with them. Because after their big, infamous, disastrous press conference, where it was like
Hmm.
this really small room where, and it's funny because I've been in rooms that look like that. I could smell it. I could still, if I look at those old videos, I could smell it. It's like they were trying, but they didn't have the big stage. They didn't have the production value. So why do that when it's like, all right, let's team up with Mega 64 and do this streaming only presentation that we can control, and it works great for them. Humorously enough, they did it for 2 years and then never again. But Nintendo started to do that as well with Nintendo Direct because it was cheaper. They could control the message better. They also, during the Wii era, of course, had embarrassing showcases where things didn't work as they wanted it to on stage.
Yeah.
That was part of it too. If you create a presentation, like you pre record it ahead of time, you stop having that. Microsoft with the Xbox Connect and trying to show the bottom of the shoe and it completely disfigured the person, right? The infamous Warhawk demo where the guy was like everything was crazy and wild because he didn't have a good control of it. So why would you risk embarrassing yourself when you could just pre-record it, put it out there, kind of a thing? And at the same time, what you have now is because of how easy it is to do, you have all these smaller presentations popping up everywhere, left and right. And it feels, oddly enough, for as much sensory overload as E3 looked to be, like I've never attended in person. That was my dream when I was younger. It's like, I'm going to go to E3 one day. I'm going to go to E3 one day. And depending on how conceited and naive I was, I'm going to be on stage at E3 one day. But it it wasn't nearly the sensory overload as all of these different shows, like the Future Games Showcase, the Guerrilla Collective, the
Hmm.
Wholesome Direct, and that's just a handful of them. There's so many showcases, and so many of them are just trailer after trailer after trailer after trailer after trailer. That if you, I like, this is the first year I didn't try and keep up with it all. The last few years, I
Right.
tried to keep up with everything, and at some point, it's like your brain becomes sludge. You're like, there were 3 games from that 2 hour show I liked, but I can't remember their names. I got to go through it all again. Like that kind of a thing happened. It's not worth it, I don't think. And I mean, that's just like my kind of opinion. It's like, I don't think it's really worth it to have all of these presentations. And also, like, to your point, like, one of the things I think is missing from Summer Game Fest is I think the Game Awards end up having better reveals than Summer Game Fest does.
Yeah, I think that's the case too.
Like 2 years ago, was it 2 years ago or was it 3 years ago? We had the gameplay reveal of Elden Ring, and that
Yeah.
saved that show because it was like everyone was kind of like, okay, it's all right, it's okay, it's mediocre, it's meh, and then all of a sudden you get the Elden Ring gameplay reveal, and it's like everyone's saying, yes, this is amazing. It was a great finisher, but they've never had anything like that since. And I think part of that is compared to the Microsoft presentation, where I'm surprised at how many first parties it was, but even look at the third parties they got. It's like so like Expedition 33 would have made waves at Summer Game Fest, but Microsoft got it because it's going to be. I think that's going to be one of those that's on Game Pass. I think. Don't quote me on that, but that's the thing. It's like you're like Jeff is competing with Sony and their third party partners. They're competing with Microsoft. They're competing with Future Game Showcase. They're competing with so many people, all trying to do their own thing, and competing later down the line with things like Gamescom. Because
Hmm.
Gamescom is still that big E3 type show where everyone shows up to, and you know you're going to have like an Xbox keynote there. You might have another State of Play around that time. You might have another Nintendo Direct around that time. If Nintendo's going to reveal their next system during a show, Gamescom is the most likely one, but they're probably going to do it after all that when they can just own the message.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of like Summer Games Fest this year. Like I wasn't able to watch the main Summer Games Fest live. I did get a chance to see like the Xbox showcase. I did get to see I think there was a state of play or something. There's just so many of them, and it's not like with E3. It does feel centralized. But like you mentioned, Chris, that it's just it feels very cobbled together because it's trying to bring everything into one centralized area. But these are still just individual, curated, very specialized from the publishers, and it's hard to get that unification, that same message down there. Like in the case of the Xbox showcase, I know a lot of people were very impressed at the Xbox showcase. There was a lot of first party stuff. There were a lot of, they announced the new Doom. They announced Expedition 33. I'll be honest with you, I didn't see much in that Xbox showcase that really got me excited. There weren't very many megatons there. The most of the stuff that really was interesting to me is stuff that they had already announced. So there weren't. I didn't. I know a lot of people who were really excited to see a Gears of War prequel or to see the new Doom game, but for me, it's like there wasn't much there for me. I mean, that's not Microsoft since they they closed Tango Studios, which is where a lot of the games that
Yep.
I'm interested in came from. Like I love Hi-Fi Rush. I think uh, you know, I have an affinity for Ghostwire Tokyo. It's just that there wasn't much there for me. And when you're watching one of these things, whether it's E3 or Summer Games Fest or whatever, and you don't feel like anything was really there for you, you feel like it's kind of a waste, even though, there are a lot of other people who are really excited about these types of games, but I'm just like, well, that I didn't see anything really for me. I'll just move on with my life until the next one, I guess. So,
Yeah, and I'm with you there. Like I've yet to play the Evil Within. Well, I played a bit of the first Evil Within, but I think I gave up during a Invisible Enemy because I was using GameFly at the time. It was that.
GameFly,
Yeah,
back in the day.
it was that long ago. And there, if you want to collect physical, then they're a great place to get good prices because every game I've gotten from
Yeah.
them is like refurbished.
Hmm.
So I've bought plenty of, yeah, they're used games, but the disc is clean. The box is like brand new. The only problem is the selection, especially in my case where I chose the Xbox instead of the PlayStation 5. So my selection is more limited because you're not going to carry that much Xbox compared to PlayStation. But I agree with you in regards to the Xbox showcase, and that's the thing too. It's like, okay, South of Midnight is one of those games that looks decent, but it's not that dissimilar from Hi-Fi Rush, where we have a smaller game, a linear game, propped up by its choice of art style and its thematic uniqueness, but this is not going to be a big successful AAA game. This is not going to make Starfield numbers. This is unlikely to get you that many more Game Pass subscriptions. So if this game fails to perform, what's going to happen to Compulsion Games? Are they going to stay open, or are you going to close them too? That's where my stance is, where even the games that I'm interested in, most of them come with some kind of a caveat. Or asterisk, I guess you could say that too. But I guess that's part of the thing for me too. Like I've always wondered if part of it is getting older, but I think the other one is surprises used to be frequent, and now the way the industry is structured, it's like they want to surprise you, but they can't because they have to worry about competing with all of the other surprises, and so they want to kind of get a leg up on the competition. So everything is announced ahead of time. Everything is announced like months in advance or at some other show with a teaser, and what you end up having is a whole lot of I know about this, so it's not a surprise. I know about this, so it's not a surprise. And that doesn't make them less exciting. Like Doom the Dark Ages was probably a surprise if you don't pay attention to the rumor mill. It's also
Hmm.
not a surprise in that, oh, of course they're making a new Doom game, but it's okay, we have a gameplay reveal. And if the gameplay reveal is exciting for any reason, it's that, oh, it doesn't look like Eternal, which for me is a good thing. But otherwise, it's more Doom. That E-Day trailer, I'm sure there are some people that are excited, but for me, it's like, okay, it's fully cinematic. And it's, unless you had Cliff Blazinski and the original Gears team coming back, the Coalition does not make as good of a Gears game as those original guys did. So I don't. That it's not going to get me excited just because of the IP. But I understand that Microsoft is aiming that broad approach. They are, how many people in the audience do we have, and how can we just toss interest grenades out there to get as many as we can get? Versus, oddly enough, my two favorite shows were back in May before the Summer Game Fest, even, and that was the Indie Live Expo, which is mostly Japanese indie games, and the Marvelous Game Showcase. Both of those were more exciting to me because of what they showed, and it was my personal interest, and I think that's one of the reasons why, for a lot of people, especially commenting online, Nintendo is what they wait for. Like people have you, and that's been me the past few years. Oh, Nintendo is going to save E3 for me, and they have with reveals like stinking Metroid Dread.
Yeah, I remember when, Nintendo does seem to have they cast a very long shadow over this because there have been years where they've not had much, but I think that I guess with their presence, like there was that really really good E3 Direct that they did where I think it was the very first showing of Breath of the Wild, where they just said, "Here's the open world," and then you see one of the Guardian enemies kind of chasing Link in the open world, and everyone's
Yep.
like, "Oh my God, this is crazy." Um, Nintendo does, and there have honestly, Nintendo, since they have the direct format, if they don't perform at E3 or they don't bring up the hype, well, it's like, okay, you can just wait till the next Nintendo Direct. You don't have to wait a whole year anymore because they put directs, they stagger them throughout the whole year. But like this year, where Nintendo has confirmed that there is going to be a June Direct, but it's not going to be detailing their next system. And
Nope.
that both stoked the rumor mill, but it also put a lot of let people relax a little bit. Like there's something to look forward to. As far as like what I saw at Summer Games Fest about all of the announcements that were really good, there were two that really kind of struck with me, but they I think they were actually leaked. I think the trailers actually kind of got debuted a little earlier than they were. The one that there was one the game Unbeatable, which is an
Yeah,
it was an
because
indie project that got a demo a long time ago, and it was sort of a rhythm game, but it has this very slick art style. It's sort of like it kind of reminds me like a mix between Paper Mario and like old Gainax anime, like Fully Cooley. It definitely reminded me of that, and I think it looked really good. But I think like I noticed that their trailer for this new game that announced that it was actually they got a publisher. I think it was the publisher that actually did the Balatro game, that card poker game. I don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. That trailer got released before like I think it got made private after I don't know, maybe like 10 hours of it going live. But then they re-announced it and everybody was really excited. It looks great. I think it's really exciting. But the other game that I think would have been better if Jeff didn't tease it was the new game from the Silent Hill creators, Slitterhead. That game, when they first announced it, I'm like, okay, these are the original creators of Silent Hill. These are the original creators of Siren. These are the original creators of Gravity Rush. After they kind of had that, after Sony Japan kind of was dissolved and they went independent, I was really excited to hear what they're going to do next. And Jeff said we're going to show gameplay of this game at Summer Game Fest. And I'm like, this would have been so much better if you didn't tease it. Like it would have been so much better if you just kept quiet and just revealed it and then, maybe and I know that there are a lot of people who are like, this doesn't look like a horror game. This looks really just kind of, unpolished, but I think it looks cool. I like the sort of body hopping. Uh, it reminds me of the old game Geist, like on the GameCube way back in the day.
was that the one where you
And
eat the dog food? Like you possess the dog and eat the dog, or do you possess the
I
dog
think
food?
that's the one.
Okay.
But there's a lot of games where you kind of do that sort of vibe, and I think the enemy design looks great. The melee combat and the shooting combat looks fine, but it just has this vibe that this studio, I think it's Bokeh Game Studio,
Okay, Game Studio. Yeah.
they've been making these very experimental, very unique types of games ever since Silent Hill 1 when they were a part of Sony. So I'm excited to see what Slitterhead's going to turn out as, because a lot of people, there was a lot of negative reception. They thought it didn't look. A lot of people said it didn't look polished, or they're like, "This isn't a horror game. I wanted a horror game because you're the Silent Hill creator, Keiichiro Toyama." I'm excited for that. I wish Jeff didn't tease it, because then I would have been more surprised.
Or that the trailer didn't break before Summer Games Fest that
Oh, the
morning.
trailer getting leaked that
Yeah.
was unfortunate, because I think that I mean, it wasn't a huge leak. I mean, it was going to be released maybe a few hours later, but still.
It was enough that if you could watch it before the show. But no, I agree with you. It would have been better if something like that is saved for the show. That way you're not going in expecting it. And to many of your points, I will make a minor correction. For Silent Hill 1, they were working with Konami.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
But that was one of the things in my Summer Games Fest video I published the other day, where I think I pondered it, or maybe that was one of the takes that I didn't go with. Because I've been wondering if Silent Hill is one of those ideas that is so tied to that original team, you can't do it again. Like, you cannot make a Silent Hill game without that original team because it is so much their specific vision. And now everyone trying to do a Silent Hill game is thinking too much of, well, what makes a Silent Hill a Silent Hill? And you either have people that completely misunderstand it, but the superficial stuff, or people that don't get the right tone or characters, but are trying that psychological. It's one of those things that Silent Hill, if only we could preserve it far better, Silent Hill is one of those lost things, but people forget that after his time with Konami, yes, he joined Sony, and that's where he created Gravity Rush.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you've played Gravity Rush, then the look of this gameplay is not surprising.
Hmm.
Experimental, unconventional, and I feel like this could be similar to Ghostwire Tokyo. Because, like you, I enjoy Ghostwire Tokyo. Like, a lot of people were very down on it. A lot of people were like, it's okay, it's meh. It had something special for me, though, that, like, maybe I should buckle down and make a video on that if I could finish my current one. Because I've been wanting to make a Ghostwire Tokyo video. Because the combat, like, I feel like the combat is one of those things that gets in its own way. But they're trying something, and that's what I respect. And so Slitterhead's probably going to be very similar, where it's this really neat idea. It's not executed the best,
Hmm.
but because it's trying something, it's like, even if you could sit there and you can create a laundry list of critiques, the fact that it tried something makes it special to your heart. It looks fitting in that way. And I would also recommend following the Bake Game Studio YouTube channel, because every so often, what did you say his name was? Keiichiro
Eiichiro Toyama.
H. Okay. He will sit down with other big Japanese creators and just talk with them about, working in the games industry, how long like, he's got one with Shinji.
Mikami.
Yes, I was about to say Murakami, and I'm like, that is someone completely different. Shinji Mikami, one with Hideaki Itsuno of Dragon's
Hmm.
Dogma and Devil May Cry. I believe he's got a Suda 51 one as well. So he's got like all these big Japanese creators that he'll just sit down and they're having a beer and they're just talking about stuff. And it's just great to watch some of those videos. And regardless of anything, I think Slitterhead is keeping that inventive spirit alive of these Japanese games that once upon a time were more capable of getting away with, jank and not quite hitting it, but interesting enough people were willing to give it a try and love it. Because that's, I think, the real issue we're at is the games industry has expanded so much, but with that, you have people that are willing to only tolerate so much jank.
Yeah, I do. Something tells me that Slitterhead is going to not review that well when it comes out. That being said, I can very much see it having a very strong cult following like Silent Hill because kind of to your point on Silent Hill, like I know a lot of people who are very, very passionate about the Silent Hill series. I'm relatively inexperienced for it, but I do think that it has a lot of value. Like there are people who played every single Silent Hill game, every the Team Silent stuff, the new stuff that they don't like, and even some of the more obscure stuff. But I am very much aware of I kind of joke around with some of my friends who are really big Silent Hill fans, and it's like what I'm seeing with like the Silent Hill 2 remake, they're it's a combination of this almost overprotective attitude toward preserving the original Silent Hills vibe because it's so important to so many people. And I can understand there also being a lot of scorn towards how Konami has approached the franchise, whether it's all the pachinko stuff, the merchandising, getting studios that maybe not know that much about Silent Hill. Like, aside from like the Silent Hill 2 remake, there's that Silent Hill F project that's run by that has the Higurashi writer, I believe. I can't remember their name.
Yeah.
But Silent Hill F, we know nothing about it. For all we know, and I've kind of joked with some people, it might be a multiplayer live service Silent Hill. It very much could be.
Oh,
I'm
you're not wrong.
I'm scared to say that, but knowing how Konami has kind of approached this franchise, I would not put it past them because we don't know. We don't know, but it very well could happen. But in the case of Bokeh Game Studio, they're preserving a lot of the same attitudes and creative mindsets that have made Silent Hill, Siren, Gravity Rush these very treasured projects by the people who played them. So seeing, people say that the Slitterhead gameplay doesn't look that great, and I'm thinking, what are you talking about? This is the kind of stuff that this studio, that the creatives that form this studio have kind of built their brand on. I think it looks interesting, and I think that's the one thing I'm really excited about. It looks interesting. It may not look polished or, sanitized in that way. There's clearly a creative direction going on with this project that I'm really interested in seeing more of. So I think that the gameplay looks cool, and I'm very excited for the project.
And I think that goes back to what we were saying earlier, right? Like even even if you want more Gears of War E Day is going to play like a Gears of War game.
Hmm.
Doom Dark Ages, even if it's not playing exactly like Doom Eternal, it's going to play like a Doom game. It's like you are the Doom Slayer. You're going to be slaughtering hordes of demons. It's going to be very arcadey in its action. Slitterhead, you're looking at it and you're like, I get a sense of how it plays, but I'm not sure until I get my hands on it. And that's new. That's different. That's exciting. And I don't bemoan a lot of I don't bemoan a lot of players not doing that. Like I used to talk about when I was younger, like, oh, we need more innovation. And the thing is, innovation isn't just something you conjure up. Most attempts to innovate fail because what looks good on paper is awful in execution. So it's better usually to iterate. Or I personally like genre fusion, where you'll take ideas from different game genres and mix them together. It's why I love the Darksiders games, because the first one, you take character action combat with Zelda dungeon design, with Prince of Persia wall climbing and stuff, and you end up having a really good blend of things that no other game plays like. Even if it doesn't do those individual things as well as the others, you still have something that doesn't play like other games do. And with Slitterhead, it's the even more rare. We're going to really try and go different. We're going to try and take this. And you could tell they've got different ideas like parrying. Like there are parts in that video you could tell they're parrying the enemy attacks and stuff. So it's not like it's completely unfamiliar,
Right.
but the like what is the format of this, right? Like it's not open world. He did say that in an interview. I believe it's like everything's an individual mission. But even then, it's like, okay, so what's the structure of this game and what's the structure of the story? And am I playing multiple characters? Because it looks like some fights there are multiple characters in there. So can I hop between them at will? And like once I like hop in a body, is that person's life no longer their own? Did I just wreck the rest of their life forever? So there's questions of that as well, and that's a rare thing to look at a trailer and want to know more, right?
Hmm.
But for a lot of people, I think it's more, and this is where again, like, because right now you and I are both core gamers. We've been playing for most of our lives, which at this point would be definitely like 25 to 30 plus years for each of us. And unlike like there's a lot of people out there that they only play games as a additional activity. Like
Hmm.
it's not their primary hobby, it's not their primary method of relaxation. There's a bunch of other stuff they do, and like games are what they do on a rainy day, and they're going to want something that's a lot more reliable. My neighbor's actually a perfect example. I was talking to him, and he's got an Xbox and a Switch, and the only games he plays are MLB, Madden NFL, Call of Duty, and Pokemon. And it's funny because Pokemon is like one of these things is not like the other, but he loves Pokemon and he plays every new mainline entry. And that's what he plays. Those four games are the only things he plays. And for some people, you would either replace one of those games with Assassin's Creed, or you would add Assassin's Creed to that list. It's so when you have something like Slitterhead, it is only going to appeal to a limited market. But again, Summer Game Fest is trying to hit as diverse a population as possible, and so is Xbox. And the safest way to do that is to do what's proven and try to iterate on it.
Yeah, it's I think it's hard to sort of strike that balance, and in credit to Jeff, it's just that you got to find something that's going to get everybody excited, whether it's a game, combining something like the announcing like a new, Call of Duty game and also announcing like a new Pokemon game. That's a huge amount of people that you're going to cover with one or the other, maybe even both. But and that in a way sort of makes it sanitizes a lot of the announcements, because you got to find something that the majority will be able to appreciate. You're not going to find super experimental projects in not very many of them, and it's frustrating because like that's the kind of stuff that I'm into. Like I want to see just something that is familiar. I do want some level of familiarity, because then there's something that that I can kind of tie to. But I want to see something new. That's why I was kind of impressed by the Expedition 33 thing that the Xbox showcase showed, because I'm like, wow, this for the first I was watching it and I'm like, wait, is this a turn-based RPG?
Yep.
Is this because as far as I know, we haven't had too many turn-based RPGs really take on that art style.
Nope.
Like there were like action commands, like Mario RPGs.
Yep.
It looked like this completely unheard of combination of it just seems like the art style didn't match the kind of game that it was looking at, but I think that was cool. I think that's because you're not going to see that kind of thing. When you have
Exactly.
timing based attacks in your turn-based RPG, you think of like a Mario RPG, like Paper Mario or something, but this had this very almost photorealistic art direction, but it still had this fantasy design. It was interesting. I don't know if I need to kind of hear more about it to kind of sell me on it, but that really stood out as this combination of ideas that I haven't seen a game like that in a while. So it's really fascinating that is such a big budget project from the publisher, and that they're going to try and make that happen.
Well, could be. As I've discovered with this latest Steam Next Fest, there are some games whose graphic quality look like they could be AA or AAA, but they're indie, so they're lower budget, they're smaller, and when you play it, it plays like it's a smaller team. It does not have that AAA polish. It's got
Hmm.
issues and errors here and there. So Expedition 33 could very well be a AA level game. But because of the capabilities of Unreal Engine or other engines out there, it's able to look like that polished AAA kind of a game and meet what people expect from a AAA level title. For me, it's most interesting because I have always wondered if Final Fantasy could do a turn based game and still be successful. Because people assume that you can't. And when others will point to things like Persona, it's like you have to look at the numbers Persona sells versus the numbers that Final Fantasy has previously sold. Like if Persona 5 is the best selling in that series and it doesn't come close to like the kind of stuff that Final Fantasy 10, 13 could sell, or I think even what 15 sold. And the thing is, like, we don't know if a big budget turn based game like it could work. We now know Baldur's Gate 3 can do really well.
Hmm.
So, Dragon Age, I imagine there's people in the trenches at BioWare that are looking at like, they have to develop a action based Dragon Age that ditches the RPG element combat and the party mechanics, and are looking at Baldur's Gate and are like, that should be us. That could have been us. But with Final Fantasy, they've said like, oh no, people don't want to play turn based. They don't want to play this. They don't want to play that. And it's like, meanwhile, this game comes in and becomes a great buzz. But is it going to be enough of a buzz to appeal to the market that Final Fantasy and Square Enix want to sell to? And that goes into my digression of, is it perhaps past time for Final Fantasy to be that game? Like, I think Square Enix needs to have the harsh lesson that Capcom learned, which was Capcom wanted to make the Call of Duty numbers, and they couldn't with not even with Resident Evil. So when they decided to just make Resident Evil again, they were successful and profitable. So maybe you could find better success when you're not trying to chase the biggest numbers, but that's a whole digression. Before we move on, because you did mention something I want to segue to, my buddy Tracer Frenzy in the comments says, I often hear the lament of the lacking middle market of games where you would often see new and innovative games. At that price point, it's lower risk than AAA. Funny you should mention that because I was not sure on Capcom's Kinitsugami Path of the Goddess game until I watched a GameSpot gameplay video, and I knew I was interested when I'm yelling at the screen because the game's journalist is obviously not doing mechanics that I've figured out already, just by watching them play. So that meant I wanted to get my hands on it. I wanted to play it, and it's $49.99, at least on Steam. So Capcom, instead of releasing a $60 or $70 game, is taking this concept and releasing it at $50, which today is a budget price for a AAA studio title, but it does feed into that middle market. It's like high middle market, but it's around there. So it's interesting that I think if you look more on some of the games coming up, you are finding more publishers and developers are experimenting with lower price points as well.
Yeah, I think that's interesting to think of the whole double A sort of approach to games, because there have been a lot of games that have kind of done that. These games that don't seem to appeal to the most mainstream of the mainstream, that they know aren't going to make Call of Duty numbers, or even like just like the big publishers are just willing to take a chance. I think that we're sort of there's definitely a void in the double A space that I think desperately needs to be filled, because we have the very small budget independent games, and then we have the big AAA ones, and there's a huge difference there that needs to be approached. I mean, there are smaller publishers that are really kind of do it. I think the Expedition 33 one is interesting because I believe it's being published by Kepler, who've done things like Scorn, Sifu. They have a very wide variety of the types of games that they publish. So I'm really wondering, because we're seeing publishers do these things, but we really don't know where they're going to land. It's hard to know. I like seeing these double A projects, even if they may not have the appealing price point, at least not at launch. But I would absolutely love to see more of these types of games, because the AAA market is so saturated. It's so sterilized. There's just nothing that really does anything super new to me. And I'm looking at like the double A ones. I mean, I think the whole discussion of the quote unquote double A market, the middle market, it definitely sort of came back into the discussion around the time Hellblade 1 came out. Because when Ninja Theory, that was their Ninja Theory before they were acquired by Microsoft, had historically a very bad track record in the eyes of publishers. They were making games for Bandai Namco, they were making games for Capcom, they were making games for Sony, and they never were able to reach the sales expectations that the publishers wanted. They always underperformed in the eyes of the publisher. So then they're like, you know what, we're going to try a self-published game. We're going to self-publish this. We're going to make Hellblade. Very niche design, but with a very strong amount of polish that you'd expect from a higher budget game. And Hellblade, regardless of what you think about the game's quality, it was able to meet expectations. It was able to get a lot of people to play these types of games that maybe they wouldn't approach at first because it was just a lower budget, but still had the polish of what you'd expect from, a photorealistic game like that. So, and then they get acquired by Microsoft, and I'm terrified that what's gonna happen to them is the same thing that's been going on with Sony, Capcom, and Bandai Namco. Ninja, like Hellblade 2 came out. Overall, the reviews were fine. They were above average, but Ninja Theory, who had kind of brought back this discussion of AA games, I think that Microsoft is gonna really end up doing some really bad things to them just because they're in the same publisher hostile position as they were way back in the day when they were originally making the games that kind of got people interested in the Ninja Theory vibe. So
Well, if you remember, they also had that Bleeding Edge game, which was their attempt at a melee focused hero shooter,
yeah.
and that underperformed because that didn't even get that they Microsoft acquired them in time for that to be exclusive, to be a first party exclusive, and it drew no interest. And I think part of it was melee based hero shooter was too early, and it's also one of those things where I feel like I talked about this when it came to Concord. Character design and lore really make a difference. And I don't think Bleeding Edge had a lot of great character design. I think Bleeding Edge is an early example of you can have the most interesting or creative or inventive gameplay to try and put a new spin on this style of game, and it won't matter because you need to also appeal to these other factors. Because people that play hero shooters do care about more than just the mechanics. They care about
Oh yeah, for
what do these
sure.
characters look like, what are these characters, what are their personalities, what is the lore, like what's the backstory here. And Bleeding Edge, they didn't even have anything to advertise lore or story. But that's, I mean, you might be right because Hellblade 2, and it could be timing, it could be that it took too long. I feel like a year or two earlier, Hellblade 2 would have done really well, but now, especially because it's like you're right around the corner from Shadow of the Erd Tree. Like people
Oh
have
yeah.
been going through Elden Ring, and I'm one of them. I've been playing a whole bunch of Elden Ring, trying to get back to Moog Palace and be ready for that jump into the DLC. And like even Nine Souls, I haven't been able to get Nine Souls, which I know you've been playing and you've been really enjoying. And that game is probably suffering from being too close to Shadow of the Erd Tree. So there are some games that are just this is a black hole season where you're not necessarily bound to fail because not everyone has Elden Ring, not everyone wants to play Elden Ring, but people are hungry for something like that. Because regardless, like Elden Ring hit those AAA numbers, and that's a lot of people to be excited for new DLC and new content. So it's going to be rough, and that's the thing. Like even my friend Joey, he played Hellblade 2. He was enjoying it, but most of his commentary was on the visuals. And contrary to what certain corners of Twitter believe, visuals can only carry you so far. Right? Like someone like there was a little bit of a meme that was comparing like four different games. I think it was God of War, Horizon, Hellblade 2, and one other Sony first party, and it's just like a zoom in of the eyeball.
Oh
Well,
yeah,
not
I've
the
seen
eyeball,
that
but like
everywhere.
part of the face and the eye, and it's like man, we were living in an incredible time, and it's like they look like they're from the exact same game though. Like okay, you can do this level of fidelity, but not only does it fail to differentiate like which is which game, but at the same time, how much does it cost for that? Versus again like that Indie Live Expo, one of the games that got me to sit up was called Nightmare Operator. PlayStation 1 aesthetics, but it looks a bit like it plays like a Resident Evil 4 kind of game.
Hmm.
The character designer for Gravity Rush designed the main character, not the monsters or anything, but they designed the main character.
Hmm.
So you have that, and then you also have a weird twist where they wanted to input fighting game inputs in order to
Huh.
change your gun shape. So if you want to switch from like machine gun to shotgun style, you put in like a Hadouken or something. And it's like,
That's interesting.
I'm not sure how that'll work in execution, but okay, that's a spin. But the game, despite that PlayStation One aesthetic, it's really well crafted, and so it looks really interesting. The thing is, who's that game going to appeal to? Core players and not the mainstream. I also think there's another element too when you talk about like the double A space and also the pricing element, because once upon a time, if cap like there are some people that will look at a game that if it releases at $40, think that means it's less of a good game. It's not that good of a game. But I think not only have indie games been changing that perception, but people underestimate the value of Gen Z coming up with, especially like we're talking about kids that grew up with Minecraft. And what does Minecraft look like? Right?
Right.
And what's the pricing point of games like Minecraft? And how many free to play games do they do? Because if we're judging games quality by price, then what does free to play mean? But a lot of these kids play free to play games, so they will also play newer games. Because if you look at the Capcom survey, the favorite game by those aged 10 to 20 is basically Devil May Cry 5, and after Devil May Cry 5, the original Resident Evil 4. Not the remake, they love the original Resident Evil 4 and the remake, both of them. But that just goes to show like a lot of people that aren't that old, like that are on the younger end of the spectrum right now, love these games that would not have been considered mainstream viable. And so I think part of that is with Gen Z, gaming is going back to being niche. You're reaching a point where with the millennial generation and Gen X generation, everybody played Nintendo. Everybody played some form of Genesis game, even if it was just Mortal Kombat and Madden. And yet the people that played like Final Fantasy, the people that played Super Metroid and Legend of Zelda, they were more and more niche. And so you have that with the 30 to 40s age group playing video games today, where you do have a core market, but it's vastly outnumbered by that more casual mainstream market. Gen Z, I think you're having more of a core market and less of a broad mainstream market. And that broad mainstream market is more free to play and mobile specifically.
Yeah, one other thing that I think kind of contributes to that in, just the perception of pricing, and I think it's something that depending on who you talk to, it's either a good or a bad thing. It's just the very existence of subscription services like Game Pass. Like I don't have Game Pass. I've never had Game Pass because I just think that I don't need my backlog to be any bigger. I do not need a list of any more new games that I'm not going to play because I just don't have the
Yep.
time.
Yep.
But I know that, with games like Hi-Fi Rush, like I ended up buying that one. I actually got it on Steam. I actually ended up buying Scorn when it first came out. And there's a perception that if something is on Game Pass, if something doesn't look like a game that is, that's worth shelling out 40, 50, $60, even $70, someone can say, "Oh, it's on Game Pass, I'll give it a try." And the unfortunate case of that is that usually when someone plays a game on Game Pass, they're not going to go out and buy it. They're not going to go out and get something else from the publisher because it's like this was on Game Pass. It was just bundled in with that. And that kind of sucks because I think that the game, not just the perception of what the quality of a game, because if it's on Game Pass, there is a stigma that says like, oh, it's a Game Pass game. It's not going to be as polished as Elden Ring or whatever.
And there are
And
definitely. Oh, go ahead.
but I also think that it's the price and the quality. It has skewed what many people consider to be a good game, and we know that Game Pass is not a sustainable business model for a lot of these developers because Hi-Fi Rush, everybody loved it, amazing game, great reviews, sold quite well. Tango got closed. It really, I think that was a really eye-opening moment for anybody. You can make the case that it's like, oh, the game didn't perform. It's not surprising that the developers weren't able to make enough money in the eyes of the publishers. But Hi-Fi Rush, everybody loved. I loved it. Everybody loved it. It was just because it was so different. It was on Game Pass. People played it, but it wasn't enough to keep Tango alive in the eyes of Microsoft. And I think that that's a huge thing that we need to consider. That quality is not going to save your studio if it doesn't do the numbers that the publisher believes is worth it. And I just seeing that Tango wasn't able to stay active, that just bothered me so much, and it bothered a lot of people. So when I see, I'm sure everybody at Ninja Theory is walking on eggshells because they know that if something like that's as recognizable as Hi-Fi Rush still can't make it when you're looking at a niche product, a niche type of game that still manages to have a pretty bank-breaking budget, I really do feel like Ninja Theory is in a very precarious situation. I very much feel for them.
And that's the thing when you think about the fact that like Matt Booty was out there saying we need more smaller games that win awards, and it's like
You just
right
had
there,
one.
right
Yeah.
there.
What happened to that?
And that's the funny thing too, because when you think about it, like I don't really think much of the Game Awards as an actual award show. I
Oh
don't.
yeah,
I don't.
it's yeah.
I don't take its the merit of the awards very seriously. But you also got to see the past several years. Microsoft just does not show up. Like they barely are represented. Sony's usually dominating, and this year I feel like will be the first year that I mean Microsoft's going to have Hellblade, Avowed, and Indiana Jones. And of those,
Hmm.
I expect Indiana Jones to probably be the one that takes the most Game of the Year kind of nominations, game direction nominations. Sony will be there in the multiplayer category with Helldivers 2, and they'll be there in the family category with Astrobot. But will they be there for the? And I'm thinking first party specifically. Will they be there? Because
Right.
Stellar Blade will probably be there for best action game. Will it be there for game of the year? I don't see it being there for game of the year, but I've been surprised before. Rise of the Ronin, I don't think will be nominated. It did not get enough positive response. But there are definitely things that this year is going to be a little different where Microsoft will be represented at the Game Awards, but that's also more because Sony was asleep at the wheel trying to chase live service. And so, first party wise, they don't have much that typically fills the, we'll call them Game Awards favorites for nominations of Game of the Year, Best Game Direction, Best Game Design, all that stuff. But real quick, I'm going to read this off, but I don't know if I'll respond to it. I feel like most of the games I've enjoyed the most in the past couple of years are the AA games. I can't remember a AAA game I felt excited for. I think it's a mixture because I know smaller AAA, like I loved Resident Evil Village and I loved Metroid Dread, but those are both AAA because they're Nintendo and Capcom respectively. But yeah, I mean, how about you? I imagine you're also on that smaller scale, partially because I think we both really like Japanese developers, and Japanese
Yeah.
developers are rarely as large of a team as Western studios in the AAA space.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to like Nintendo's AAA products are just more interesting to me. They have franchises that I think have more that I'm drawn to. You know, I like I do like a lot of Japanese developed games. You know, I appreciate the uh, the Bandai Namco's, the Atlases, just those types of games, and even some of the smaller ones like Bokeh Game Studio is they don't have a huge Square Enix level budget, but they're making the kinds of games that I'm interested in. I'm trying to think of like what you would even consider a triple A game that I'm super excited for, and there's just not much. There are really right now, aside from Slitterhead, there's probably two games that I think I'm from this year that I'm really kind of getting into, and one of them is Nine Souls. I'm still having a ton of fun with that, and that was an independent project. But the only other one that I can think of that I'm actually really excited for and that I'm actively anticipating actually comes out in a couple weeks, and that's Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail. It's, that's the only, like, I am not very experienced in MMOs, but I plowed through that entire story all the way up to the Endwalker expansion that came out a few years ago. And I'm really excited to continue that because I have friends who play it. I really enjoy the story of 14. But I'm trying to think of like any other games that I know are releasing this year, aside from Slitterhead, that I'm really excited for. And there's just not much. It just feels like this year, and there may be a bunch of different reasons for that. I'm content with just kind of keeping just a few close by. I mean, I'm a big Sonic the Hedgehog fan, so I'll play the Sonic and Shadow Generations game that's coming out. Um, there are just some odds and ends that I may keep my ear to the ground on, but it feels like a pretty, I don't know. There's just not much this year that I'm actively anticipating, and it's early. It's still June. For all we know, there might be a lot of things dropping in the holidays, but yeah, AAA is just, it feels so sterilized. And we have all, like, it's interesting that you brought up Concord because I was looking at that game and I'm like, okay, it's trying to be Guardians of the Galaxy. For all we know, it might have wanted to be Guardians of the Galaxy. But there's so many hero shooters. The only thing that I can think of when I was watching the Concord trailer is like, this is not going to last. This game is going to be, it's going to go for like maybe a season and then the servers will close down and the studio will be dissolved. And it's just, this type of game has been done so many times and only a very small few have been able to reach the numbers that I think a studio is actually going to want to make. I don't see Sony keeping that game active at all. It like I'm watching the characters. I'm like, was this going to be a Guardians of the Galaxy hero shooter? Because I swear, it's just like carbon copy character designs, character attitudes, lore. It just feels like a whole lot of nothing to me. And no disrespect to any of the developers who are actively trying to make this game a success, but they're in a very tough position because Concord didn't do much for me. It didn't do much for a lot of people, apparently.
I see. This is where it's like I have a very harsh opinion here, and it is that Concord convinces me we have a lot of people that are imposter creatives. They wear the creative lifestyle on their sleeve. Their Twitter is filled with discussions about being creative, and they probably spend a lot of time in role play forums and fan fiction forums, but they're not actually creative people. So everything they write is an imitation of things that they enjoy, and the things that they enjoy are broad appeal things, but they don't actually like dig deep and find something that, like, there's a lot of directors out there, right, that they watch Star Wars and Star Wars is what made them want to be a film director, but then they learn more. Gareth Edwards is actually an example I'll use because outside of his work of Rogue One, I really enjoyed his work on Godzilla 2014, as surprising as that might be, because watching Godzilla 2014 is really enjoyable because he knows how to set up a scene. Like, even a CG filled scene is storyboarded so well that you can watch a story play out as there's setup payoff in like one pan and scan. He is a really good director, and for that film in particular, he also understood the theme and tone he was going for versus Adam Wingard, who feels like, yeah, I'm a Godzilla fan. I loved watching it on a Mystery Science Theater 3K when it was Godzilla versus Megalon. Like, it feels like that's where his knowledge of Godzilla comes from. A like people making jokes about one of the worst movies of the Showa era. And that's what a lot of people will go to the theater and see Godzilla Cross Kong and think like, oh yeah, this is Godzilla, it's big dumb fun. And it's like, no, but that's where now we have people that are like, all right, we're going to make our own Overwatch, but we don't understand what made Overwatch successful. And I watched the YouTuber Mug Thief discuss the Sony State of Play in Concord, and he made a comparison to the reveal trailer for Overwatch. And it was cinematic as well, but you're not focused on the character specifically. The first thing you're focused on is a couple of teenagers in a museum, well, a teenager and his younger brother in a museum talking about Overwatch, and you have the younger brother is starry-eyed. He's talking about like, oh, that's that thing and that's that thing, but the older brother is more jaded because they're disbanded now, and it's almost like talking about disbanded superheroes, and then boom, a bunch of them show up because they're in the middle of a firefight there. And that firefight is going to display what are these characters' powers in addition to what are their personalities. And they're far more varied than, you know, Concord, which is, I don't even know what this setting is generic sci-fi setting where these characters are all bounty hunting for this objective and they're competing with one another, and literal Peter Quill with the I don't know, the I don't want to say uptight girl, but the one that's always poking holes in his plans, and then you have Drax but with hair or fur. Like it's this there's nothing creative about it. There's nothing that understands proper storytelling or getting the interest. There's nothing that understands what the actual hook is. And I think this is one of those things that's perpetrated video games for a while now, where you've had people that are capable of writing dialogue that doesn't sound awful. It sounds better than some of the worst examples of the 90s, but they aren't capable of writing original characters. They don't know how to construct a setting. They don't know how to construct a world. And so it's passable, it's adequate, but it's not good enough to get those numbers that you really want. That's my harsh perspective, at least.
If there's one thing that I think some folks online have actually pointed out about the Concord reveal is they use the phrase Concord universe. And a lot of people, I actually just recently watched a video by Arlo where he kind of very harshly grilled just how devoid of creative spark this game seems to be.
Arlo's the puppet guy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The blue puppet. Okay.
And he, and at first, the whole point of the video and what a lot of other people are kind of mirroring the sentiment is that this feels very committee driven. This feels like there's no real creativity involved in that trailer. But he pointed out where it's like Concord universe, and so it's like, is this based on a movie, a book, a TV show? Is this like an existing property that we're trying to make a game on? But there's nothing there, and that makes me think that they're trying to make this into the next big thing. They're trying to create this universe that is going to have merchandising. It's going to have adaptations. We have big plans for all of the characters in this game.
What if?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what if some of the other live service games that have been unannounced that are in development are supposed to be in this universe, right?
See, that's the thing. This makes me think that they have huge plans for something that's not going to last. That's really what I'm kind of finding in a lot of the, because when you use the phrase Concord universe, and maybe this is unintentional, maybe they meant something completely different when they use this phrasing.
It is
It
sci-fi,
just
so
it just sounds like they have huge plans on this, so a lot is riding on this game succeeding, and I don't see it happening. I think that they're really trying to put the cart before the horse, and in a realistic, you can be as harsh as you want on Concord, but I just think that I don't see this catching on. I don't see this becoming the new big everyone's streaming it on Twitch game. I can't help but be pessimistic towards this game's future. And the fact that, and I don't think this is the developer's mindset. I believe that this is very much the publisher. Like, we're trying to make this the next huge Concord universe where everyone will know when we say Concord, they mean like this big thing that's going to go on. I don't see this lasting. I feel bad saying that because there's clearly a lot of resources and hard work from the developers trying to get into this, but it feels very DOA, very dead on arrival.
oh, I would not be surprised if it is. I mean, part of it, like I look back on a couple of things. One being like Babylon's Fall, right? Babylon's Fall
Oh
never
God,
had a
I feel
chance.
bad for that one. Yeah.
I feel bad for it too. Like I played the demo, but it's like playing the demo was enough to tell me this game doesn't have it. Like it's not bad, but it doesn't have it to be a live service. And then Exoprimal, I loved Exoprimal's gameplay. I hated the live service, even though like the funny thing is it wasn't as predatory as it could have been,
Hmm.
but it just didn't have the content and the way they told the story. And again, the characters even like I wasn't very fond of the characters. They weren't that interesting, but the idea of being in a power suit fighting dinosaurs was so genius. It feels like it was wasted on the wrong format of game. Like that needed to be a game mode to a more full experience. Like you
Right.
needed a campaign, in a campaign you could play co-op. You needed a campaign, and then you needed your horde mode shooter on the side. Trying to make it a live service that is self-sustained is like you made a great set of mechanics that are going to be wasted. And I'm surprised they're still supporting Exoprimal. But it's that one I do not see lasting by the end of 2025. Like I don't see it lasting by the end of 2024. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear I wouldn't be surprised if we hear by the March financial reports or something that Exoprimal is getting the plug pulled because live service is a huge gamble.
Hmm.
And I mean, as you said, putting the cart before the horse. How much money needs to be invested immediately? And part of the funny thing is that me and my buddy Nolan have even talked about. It's like Sony, you want to make a new live service hero shooter? Make a game based on Destiny with these characters during Twilight Gap. Like it's there. Like you can have your hero shooter of these characters from Destiny because you have the different heroes, different personalities. You can play whichever one you want, but change the context. Make it in the past. Make it during specific event, and you could do your hero shooter if you want that way. And you have all of the Destiny fans will play it, or at least most of them, a good chunk of them, because you already have lore, you already have the characters, everything's established already. You have your hook, but instead it's like because there's not even this. There's like the extraction shooter that was almost the same idea as hyenas from Sega and Creative
Hmm.
Assembly, like almost the same idea. Like it's sci-fi. We're gonna break in, steal from the wealthy, kind of a thing. It's like you guys are all trying these same ideas, and there's not an interest. There is not a market for it. And also another reason Concord's dead on arrival, it's not free to play.
Yeah, that's a stain. That's
Yeah,
ugh.
that's going to be rough to try and get new players into. Like I feel like even Exoprimal, the biggest reason it had players was Game Pass.
Hmm.
All right, next question, perhaps last question regarding Summer Game Fest. This one I don't want to get into anywhere too controversial, but it is one of those interesting topics that I feel like people have their opinions on. What do you think of Jeff Keighley himself?
Jeff Keighley. I guess, I remember like the first time I ever heard of Jeff Keighley was way back in the days of G4. He was on I forgot the name of the show. It was he was just a routine host there. Um I don't really remember too much of what he said over time, but when he decided to do the Game Awards, everyone's kind of on board. They're like, they're the Oscars, there's the Grammys, everyone's trying to, make their own big award show. And he's enthusiastic, but there's clearly, everyone memes on the Dorito Pope thing, but you can't really come back from that without people joking around with you saying that you are in the pockets of these publishers. And the Game Awards in general, I remember a long time ago, I think I looked up something about the Grammys because I'm a big music fan. So in a way, I'm sort of tangentially curious about what goes on at the Grammys. I believe it was, I think it might have been the lead singer of Tool, Maynard James Keenan, who said, because Tool had won a Grammy, I think, for Best Metal Album or Best Metal Song years and years ago. I think it was like the early 2000s, in fact. And Maynard didn't show up to the acceptance ceremony because he felt the Grammys don't honor the creatives. They don't care about the people who actually write the music. It is the industry, it is the business celebrating itself or something like that. And you couldn't make a better comparison to the Game Awards than that. It's so corporate. You got executives, you got publishing representatives doing all of the decisions on the awards side. And Jeff just seems okay with that. He really feels like he wants the games to have some sort of recognition on the level of the Oscars. He wants them to be treated as these big cultural milestones. And I guess my perspective on that is like, who are you trying to court? It just feels, it's like games are here. The games are always going to be a big part of culture. Now more than ever, we're seeing such variety, so many different ideas being pushed out there, tons of creativity. And yet you want to get all these celebrities on your stage, many of which who've never played a game. I mean, you can have Kojima up there, but Jeff's relationship with Kojima is so weird to me.
It
It
is.
feels very
It
just.
is. From a viewer perspective, you start to wonder if Jeff Keighley is like, if you could make a horror movie out of this, right? Where Jeff Keighley is like the Kathy Bates, was that it? To Hideo Kojima, right? I'm thinking of the book.
It's
I'm thinking of the book and movie Misery is what I'm thinking
yeah,
of.
yeah. But it's just the problem I have with. I mean, people have criticized Jeff for not acknowledging all of the layoffs that have happened, or not acknowledging the creativity, the actual developers. It feels very, very flashy, very corporate, very sanitized. But from what I recall, he has, whether people are just kind of twisting his arm over and over again, he has acknowledged that there's some real instability going on in the industry. It's not all sunshines and rainbows, which is what I think he kind of pitched in previous years. He's enthusiastic, but he's so enthusiastic about games that he wants them always to be shown in a good light and not acknowledging that there are things that need to improve, whether it's representing developers, whether it's looking at games from a creative side instead of just, I don't know, like Last of Us Part 2 or, all those games that feel very, very appealing to the cinematic side instead of like creative game design. Like you're not going to find like I'm trying to think of like a game that would never ever ever be represented at the Game Awards. Just these like I'm still surprised that Disco Elysium actually got an award one year, but it's my perspective
Dead
on
or Alive
Jeff.
Extreme Beach Volleyball will never get representation at the Game
Oh,
Awards.
absolutely not. Like, but I feel like Jeff. I don't want to say his heart is in the wrong place because he clearly cares about games, but I think he cares about them he always has the Oscars and movies on his mind. And I think he believes, from what I can gather from his demeanor, is he wants games to be appreciated by the people who care about the movies the most. But when you look at the gaming community, or at least in my represents, like, we don't need validation from the people at the Oscars. We know that there are a bunch of really awesome games out there that are pushing the boundaries, that are doing things that are going to separate themselves. I think the biggest criticism that I have from his attitude is he's seeking validation from people who he really shouldn't be seeking validation from, because it really doesn't matter. Games are here and they're always going to be here. There's no point in trying to suck up to the Oscar crowd. I really don't think there is. That's really my biggest criticism I have of him.
I'm actually, that's along the lines of how I feel. I think, and that's the thing, like the whole Dorito Pope thing. I find I have a laugh in that, and I do love how the photo that goes around, he looks absolutely like dead eyed. He looks
Yeah.
like he looks like he's lost his spirit. But
He
that's
looks very
because
defeated.
if you recall, that was during the Spike TV Game Awards days, where it wasn't
Hmm.
his show.
Right.
He runs the show now. It's no longer him taking orders. He's running the show. And he's been trying to figure out since then. Because I remember several years ago, he had an interview where somebody asked him, why don't you spend more time on the awards? Why do you spend so much time on trailers? And he said, the thing is, gamers aren't a very backward looking group. They're always about what's the next thing. And I'm like, do you not? And this was during an era of remasters, like
Oh
remaster,
yeah.
remaster, remaster, right? And port begging and sequel. It's like, no, like your audience cares about the past perhaps too much. So looking back at the past year's accomplishments is definitely something that he's not focused on, but at the same time there's that commercial aspect. How does the Game Awards keep itself afloat? Those spots. It's all about having those spots for those trailers that people pay for.
Right.
So giving an like the Academy is able to do the Oscars in such a way that they can afford it. And if I were to look into it, I'm sure there would be sponsors, there would be this, there would be
Hmm.
that. There'd be all kinds of deals where there's money coming in anyway. But at the same time, like you don't have like between you don't have like half the awards actually announced on stage, and
Oh
then
yeah, most of them are like just front loaded, like just passing in between the trailers. Like they
oh
don't even have
yeah,
like any sort of real acceptance speeches or anything like that. Yeah.
yeah. Meanwhile, the Oscars are going to have every award on stage,
Right.
and they might have like a musical act or something in between, but you don't have trailers for upcoming movies coming out.
Right.
Nor do you have an award for like most anticipated game. Which why was Star Wars Outlaws in there? But that's also what goes to. I do think. See, it's weird because he's not going to be that much older than me, right? But I think his age is a part of what shapes the nature of the awards and his perception of it. Because he lives in LA is going to be one of those things. Like, if you're going to live in LA, you're going to be caught in the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. Hollywood celebrity is what you think is the for it's either your end goal. Like Young Yeah is on YouTube talking about video games, but he moved out to LA so he can do voice acting, and now he's in Inside Out too.
Right.
So I wouldn't be surprised if he's a guy that was always more interested in Hollywood than he was in video games. And then you have just other people that go out there and it's a stepping stone. And even if that's not where you are, like Jeff Keighley, I don't think that's where he is, but you're surrounded by Hollywood because you're in LA. You're surrounded by Hollywood celebrity. So that's going to skew your perspective of what is, you know, prestige, what is respectable. That's going to be a factor, but also he will have grown up during an era where video games are looked down upon by the boomer generation. Now, again, I'm not that much younger than him, and I remember, yes, when I was younger, I used to try and convince my dad that video games were a really good art form. I also tried to convince my dad that the heavy metal I listened to was just as valid as the classic 70s prog rock he loved. Yeah, that was never going to happen, and it still doesn't happen. So I've grown up. I no longer seek my old man's approval for the things that I like because I'm my own person. And I grew up in a different time than he did, and it's like I wasn't set in my ways. Now we have. I look at a game like Genshin Impact, and I look at gotcha mechanics, and I'm like, that's going to bog the game down for me. Whereas my niece plays Genshin Impact, she plays Honkai Star Rail, she's playing Wuthering Waves, Wuthering Heights, Wuthering Waves. She plays these free to play anime gotcha games, and to her that's gaming in a lot of ways. Like there's nothing unusual about it. So every generation is going to have that. So for me, it's better to be more interested in how can we appeal to the younger audience than how do I get approval from the older audience that's not going to be interested. Their mind's made up. But Jeff is to focus on that older stuff. And it might even be just that when he was a kid, what did he like to see? Oh, he liked to see celebrities show up, right? But okay, well, get Brandon Sanderson on stage. Dude confessed he likes video games. He's a fantasy author, but it's like the dude confessed he loves video games, right? So you get someone like that on there. You get people that, like, if you get someone that's at least related, but at that point, we also have plenty of voice actors like Troy Baker and Nolan North and others, plenty of others, not just those two, that are effectively celebrities in their own right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the what is his name? Ben Starr, the guy from Final Fantasy 16 who voiced Clive. That guy's a celebrity now. Like he's doing a voice in Expedition 33. He made a note on Twitter, and now people are like, So we have a celebrity. Get him on stage. Just don't have him do. Oh, there was a show. Was it a PC Gamer show? It was not a PC Gamer show, but it was similar, where he and another voice actor hosted, and it was terrible because it's the fake old E3. It's the like pre-written humor and jokes. But
Right, yeah.
I'm digressing. But that's the thing. Like you get people that are at least involved in the video games themselves. You have plenty of voice actors. You have plenty of game directors people would love to see that do have a personality. Like don't try and be Hollywood because we are our own industry. But I also think there is a mistake in believing you can have an event recognized with the prestige of something like Hollywood because video games are a great art form, but unlike film or books, you have to keep relearning the game every time you play.
Mm-hmm.
Every game, even if they're similar, has their own unique rule set. I played the demo for Flintlock Siege at Dawn or Siege of Dawn. It is a Souls light. So
Right.
some of the familiar things I've learned from playing Elden Ring and Bloodborne and all that will carry over, but only some, because this game operates differently. The animators animated the enemy attacks differently. The use of the pistol is different than some of the other games. So I have to relearn that game as I play. Whereas I already know how to speak English, so I can sit down and watch an English movie, and that's all. Like I don't have to learn anything new to follow that movie. I can, I've learned to read, and while there are new words I can learn, I can read a book and not have to really adapt a new skill. Video games are always going to be niche because people, when they sit down, don't always want to learn a new skill. They are software as much as they are an art form. And so video games can never achieve the same mainstream success as film and novels can. Individual titles can, but not games as a whole industry. And I think that's one of those things that guys like Jeff Keighley forget, or just have not realized. But there was one last point I wanted to make, and I digressed too much. Well, if you have additional thoughts, you can go ahead and voice them in case I
Yeah,
remember.
I don't see much point in using all of this time, resources, and money to try and appeal to a group of, you know, quote unquote elites to you don't need their validation. I mean, this comes with anything that kind of grew from a counterculture or a less than revered culture. You know, like you mentioned heavy metal. Like there are people's like I want, you know, the Grammys don't care about heavy metal. They don't they have a category for it, but they never show it on air. And it's like, well, you don't need
I
that
mean,
validation. You don't need that acceptance from them. That's not going to impact your enjoyment of this counterculture type of vibe.
well, at the same time, wasn't the Grammys where Metallica performed with Lady Gaga?
I don't remember that.
There was some award show where I remember Metallica played their song "Hardwired" and Lady Gaga did some voices with it. And Lady Gaga is a great singer. She is not a great metal singer because I've
Oh yeah.
heard plenty of female vocalists in metal, and Lady Gaga doesn't know how to sing with metal. But that's the thing. It's like you get the most mainstream heavy metal act you can and have them perform with one of the most mainstream pop artists you can. That's where heavy metal is going to get exposure in something like the Grammys. You're not going to get anything like you like Animals as Leaders, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh, they're never going to perform at the Grammys.
Oh, absolutely
Like
not.
they're never ever going to perform.
Oh god.
So that's and I'm fine with that too. Like, there's a part of me that thinks like you go to any football game, any stadium, and they will be playing heavy metal, and yet it's like Iron Maiden has like some of the most legendary live shows, and they're never going to get a Super Bowl game. At the same time, they're British, so why would they want to do Super Bowl? So, but that's part of. I did remember what I wanted to the last point with Jeff Keighley, and that is when it comes to the Game Awards themselves all of the people that do the voting are traditional games press, except for YouTubers that were formerly games press, like Jeff Grubb or Jeff Gersman. Jeff Gersman? Well, Gersman, regardless.
Hmm.
Or the one YouTuber I know that gets a vote that was never involved in traditional games press was Skill Up.
Hmm.
But I mean, he's gone to enough of these events. He's rubbed elbows. You know, his podcast is him was the completionist, and then it was GameSpot employees, right? Like he's buddy enough, and this is where like you were talking about elites and. No one in the games industry approaches the elite level of the wealthy in Hollywood, but
Right.
when I think, and I also just have a general distrust of the game's press. Not all of them, you got to take a case by case basis. Many of them I think really are just trying to do their job, but I think a lot of them I just do not trust their position. I think these are people that liked video games, but either don't have the passion for it or have other things they really wanted to do, and this is the job they fell into. But at the same time, having long ago tried to get into games criticism and stuff on a more professional level, I seen a lot of people that got into the industry because they were good at writing listicles. And I think a lot of games press, like, you're not going to get the games coverage you could from YouTube these days. Because YouTube is where you're going to have a lot of people that play a lot of games. They might play what you specialize in, what you favor, and at the same time, they're following so much news because I'm still salty about the last E3, the first one out of COVID, and only the games press were there, and they were like, "What can we predict from Capcom's showcase?" And Capcom told everybody, "This is what we're showing." There was nothing to predict. They told you our show will consist of this, this, and this. And there was no and more. It was our show will consist of this, this, and this. And they're predicting like Resident Evil Village VR. It didn't show. People were trying to predict a new Onimusha. No. Like people were trying to predict all these crazy things, and I'm like, you're just setting your audience up for expectations that will not be met. If you guys did your job, which you should have gotten this communication, it was Capcom's official channels. Like they said this on their own Twitter, their own social media, their own website. You, as Games Press, being tuned into these corporations' communication channels, should have known. And they're just making these predictions, which gets their audience making the predictions, and then everyone's just disappointed. And it's like, no, you should have had the been able to point to the official communication channels and said, this is what Capcom's saying, so we can't really predict anything. Like we can predict what they're going to show within these categories, but they're not going to bring us any surprises today. Boom, expectations set. No one goes in to be disappointed. Like it's it's one of those things. But I'm sorry, I'm digressing again. To rewind back once more, Jeff Keighley, because he was a games press, and he was a good one. He did a good job. He was a good writer. Because he was a traditional games press, though, that's who he relies on to cast their votes in the Game Awards. And the thing is, and I saw like Alana Pierce made a video discussing what's different between the Game Awards and like the BAFTA, I think. And in the BAFTA, everyone gets into a conversation and makes their case for something. And the Game Awards, like in a public in an office, you might have everyone vote, and then they tally the votes, and then they send the final tally to the Game Awards, and then the Game Awards tallies all the publications tallied votes. But why Games Press? Why are Games Press voting for these things? Because they don't. Because if you compare again to the Oscars, the people voting are people involved in making film. You don't have the writers of Variety and Entertainment Weekly putting in all the votes, and none of the people from the actual industry. It doesn't make any sense, and yet, why does Jeff Keighley do it? Because he used to be a games press, and that's where his mindset still is. And I think these days, and I think that also goes to the point of, Summer Game Fest has more purpose than I think the Game Awards do, because
Right.
outside of being a trailer show, you as a consumer, right? Where are you going to try and find out what games are good or what the best games of the year were? You're more likely to go to a trusted content creator that you follow than you are a impersonal publication that just voted on it from a bunch of people that, I mean, to this day, trying to watch official gameplay video from guys like GameSpot, guys like IGN, it's like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they represent more average gamers, but it's like, man, I've seen VTubers do a better job than this. But it is what it is. So that kind of summarizes my thoughts on Jeff Keighley. But I guess to summarize my thoughts on Summer Game Fest, I miss E3 because it was centralized and because I liked the pace better. Despite being sensory overload, it felt like a more measured sensory overload.
Yeah, I
And
think that makes sense.
yeah, it was a brief weekend. It was a brief holiday, and all of the trailers now and having all of the best content saved for individual publisher streams anyway, the magic's gone. I still watch because I'm interested in seeing what's being revealed, but it's the beginning of a summer marketing season, and it's fine.
I guess it's just not very like I just feel like Nintendo Directs just disrupted the entire vibe of the whole E3 thing just because you don't need to wait till the summer. And I think that what happened sort of as the end of E3 and sort of the birth of Summer Games Fest is that we're not fully committing to the Nintendo Direct format. There's still a perception that a lot of these announcements they need to be in the summer We need to have something going on here that kind of brings a lot of these announcements and makes sort of a spectacle of it. But I don't think that's needed anymore. Like even going beyond the Nintendo Direct, some of these announcements just happen. Like they don't even have trailers. Like they even just drop them on social media. That's how a majority of people found out that Kingdom Hearts is coming to Steam. There wasn't even a trailer. It was just the Kingdom Hearts Twitter saying, "Hey, these are coming to Steam on what was it yesterday, the day before?"
That actually makes sense too. Like, why not make a trailer? And the whole reason is because they don't want to pay for an ad spot,
Right,
right?
yeah. I mean, they did eventually make a trailer, but I think it's even Nintendo. I think it was the Origami King, the Paper Mario Origami King game, where they just announced it on social media, put a trailer in the post, and no Nintendo Direct, no big announcement that they stockpiled for that. It was just there. And Summer Game Fest is just kind of caught in the middle there. It's not fully committing to the you can publish this news anytime, and it's also not committed to the huge megalithic spectacle that E3 tends to get. I think that like what matters to me most is just I want to know when the games are coming out because there might be something that I'm interested in. I don't really I've sort of kind of rubbed off on the just getting excited for an E3 season because it doesn't feel like it's there anymore to me. I don't think E3 is really fulfilling its purpose anymore, and in a way, Summer Games Fest is not even doing close to that. Um, I like announcements. I like it when I see a game that I'm curious about show something kind of neat. I think that's really cool. But I do not think that we need to stockpile all of these for the summer. I think that in my eyes, you can just traditionally announce something. You don't need to make a big event out of it, and it'll just happen.
And to that end, I mean, it's funny because to me, I do feel like I appreciate the cultural touchstone moment where you're not just talking about the latest news and then it's forgotten in a week. It's a compilation where people have stuff to talk about for a while all together as a collective. But to that end, you're still going to get lost then because I mean, you can't help but have people compare like the Xbox showcase of the state of play and yeah, okay, sure, but how many years has Xbox have had nothing first party to show and had to rely on third parties? So it's not really a fair comparison. And then you have additional elements where once upon a time, before the internet, E3 is where everything was then because the games press was going to take what they learned and drag that material out for months. Like that was the news for the rest of the year. Or at least until I guess winter consumer electronics show maybe. But that's the thing, like you had all of that information that you could stretch out and now the publishers are stretching it out themselves. You're not getting the same kind of big reveals because we're going to have this trailer at Sony State. Monster Hunter Wilds is a perfect example. Sony State of Play, we get a bit more of a trailer. Actually, see, that's a perfect example of the new format. Because when was Monster Hunter Wilds revealed? The Game Awards.
Yeah.
Next time you see it, Sony State of Play. A couple weeks later, you get a little bit more info at Summer Game Fest. And on stage at Summer Game Fest, they're saying at Gamescom, we're going to have a playable demo for the press and more info to show you. So it's like they're in full marketing because they're planning every few months you get something new to keep it in your mind, to make sure you don't forget about it, to keep you hyped. And meanwhile, everyone else is competing to do the same thing because they've been advertising Space Marine 2 for Warhammer 40K like every so often, every month. And there's a THQ Nordic show in July. That's probably going to have more of a showcase on that as well. You're going to see that in Gamescom probably. So this is the beginning of if a game wasn't shown gameplay before, we're just now in the phases of it, right? Like we're going to see more Astrobot later down the line. We already saw like some avowed gameplay and Indiana Jones earlier this year, and we just got some for the Xbox conference. We're gonna have a little bit more once they decide to give the release date. At the same time, also to your point, Square Enix only showed up at one of these shows with Life is Strange Double Exposure, and then they just scheduled a premiere for their Visions of Mana release date trailer. They didn't have it at any show. It was just something they put on YouTube. And like, why didn't you put that in one of the shows? Who knows? But there it is. Like they decided that's how they weren't gonna pay anyone money for an ad spot for that. They were just gonna put it out there. So it's it really is a point where we technically, it's not just that we technically don't need something like E3, but it would be nice if we could have something like E3 as that, again, collective communal moment. If our community could stop having slap fights with itself. But also, it would need buy-in from the industry, but that would require the industry cannibalizing itself, because no matter how much you pay for an ad spot, you could easily get lost by something you do not predict. I mean, again, 2021? What? Yes, Elden Ring came out in 2022. So, Summer Game Fest 2021, first gameplay reveal of Elden Ring. Nobody remembers the rest of that Summer Game Fest. Like, people didn't remember the rest of that Summer Game Fest the week after because it was all about Elden Ring. So, all those other publishers and developers lost. Like, that's the shame of it. So, E3 as it was felt like the celebration Jeff Keighley wants it to be, but because of the nature of marketing and because of the nature of the internet, we're not going to have that feeling back.
Yeah. Like, as I grow older and I have less and less time to totally immerse myself in every single game. Like, I know a lot of people who have said 2024, look at all of these games that are coming out. It was also kind of like last year, like 2023 had the same deal on the AAA space because you have Breath of the Wild, Baldur's Gate 3, and a bunch of others. But now, like this year, there are so many indie games coming out that everyone's saying like you got to play this one, you got to play this one. Why aren't you playing Crow Country? Why aren't you playing what was it? Did Balatro come out this year? I think it did.
Balatro did come out this year, and Crow
Yeah, it's
Country.
like
I bought Crow Country. I still haven't played it. I got too much stuff I'm trying to get through.
yeah, it's like you got to play Crow Country, you got to play Balatro, you got to play Animal Well, you got to play all these games that are going on, and it's overwhelming. Like, I do not have the time to play all of these games. So I'm kind of just sticking to the ones that I know I'm really invested in. Loving Nine Souls. Gonna play Dawn Trail when it comes out in a couple weeks. I'm gonna probably spend some time playing around with Kingdom Hearts on PC. I love those games. It's great that they have a PC port that's not like anchored down by a storefront that no one really uses. Um, but in a way, I think I think that's one reason why I think the staggered approach, like announce things throughout the year, makes more sense to me because it doesn't feel as overwhelming. It doesn't feel like everyone's stockpiling all of these announcements for one point in time, and then you're kind of just thrown at, and then you don't remember the ones that you don't remember them all because there's so many. But I think that in a way, I think for me personally, having that extra staggered, just throughout the year announcements is more accommodating to someone like me. I don't feel as overwhelmed. I'm still able to keep an eye on the things that I'm actually interested in, and sort of filter out the things that I'm not really interested in. But I do see your point that there is a value for the collective announcement event. I do think you have a point that is a big part of the hype cycle, getting people excited. And, for if you're cynical, you can say, oh, it's just a marketing ploy, but people care about these announcements. They like to play the games that are out. And I think that until we fully understand what made E3 work. Like there's a lot of articles that came out when E3 said it was canceled for good. Everyone's like, why did we like E3? What about it was so interesting? And but I think it's going to take some time to really understand why E3 was so important to so many people. And I don't think that we're sort of far away enough from that reference point to really understand the big picture. I think it's going to take some more time.
Yeah, and something that actually that I realized though when you were talking about the indie game specifically was Steam Next Fest is this week. Like it's gonna close up on a Monday, and I
Hmm.
played a bunch of demos this week, and that's one of the things that kind of went in tandem with some of the shows that I watched, some of the games that I saw revealed. I added to my wish list, and right at the top of the Steam Next Fest page, there were boom, boom, boom games on your wish list that have a demo. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll get to add them. This is a missed opportunity on the AAA side, but I understand why. If you are a small indie developer, the only like this is nothing but a gain for you because you get your demo in the hands of players, and because you don't have much of a marketing budget, the more people play and like your game, the more word of mouth it can spread. The more streamers and content creators showcase your game, the more people add it to their wish list and get interested. But if you're AAA, imagine a Star Wars Outlaws demo, right? And if people play that and it's like, oh, this is all the game is, then you lose sales right there. Like I remember when Two Human had a demo way back on the 360. This was a super hyped up game. The demo released, and people were excited for the demo. Then they played it, and then pre-orders were canceled because people did not like how the game played. AAA doesn't want to take that risk. You can guarantee more pre-orders and first day sales off of hype of trailers than you can off of hype of a playable demo and getting your hands on yourself. And so Steam Next Fest is one of those things that is technically closer to the next step evolution. Why watch all of these game reveals when you can play the game yourself? Why read a preview when you can play the game yourself? And that's where indies really thrive. And even some double A games, because I played Flintlock: The Siege at Dawn. That's a double A game. That's a well known property. Because it's, former BioWare devs in there. There's some other former team member devs in there. And I found the demo to be fine. I'm not about to add it to my wish list. I did not care much for it, but there's a lot of people that got to play it that weren't interested in it before. And now they're like, oh, wish listed. I'm looking forward to this game now. And for me, there's been plenty of demos where I've never heard of this game. Let me install the demo and play it. And then after playing the demo, it's like, well, I'm sold and I am hyped. And that happened, like, because again, you're talking about this summer. If you play some of these indie games, it's stacked. There is so much coming out in July and August. And hey, they just revealed Visions of Mana is August 29th. Great. I really want to play Visions of Mana. Akimbot is a platformer in the style of Ratchet and Clank. I played that demo and I loved it, and that's also August 29th. Well then, Bloodless. Bloodless is a interesting top-down. I don't want to. It's like a parry game. It is a parry mechanic game. Very interesting. Very good art style. And that's also August 29th. So 3 games on the same day. And that's not counting like everything else coming out that month or again in July. So in a lot of ways, we are living in a great time of just great games being available. You don't have to pay attention to the AAA. At the same time, Steam Next Fest is dangerous for the wallet because you can discover way too much that you might have been, I don't know, to okay, I want to play more of this. I'm hooked now. And that does again add the question because like Steam Next Fest is more of a festival because you get your hands on these games now. than what Summer Game Fest offers. And it makes me wonder if maybe if Jeff Keighley worked with Steam and Steam Next Fest, Summer Game Fest, they were the same thing. Like during this period, any game we show is going to have a demo, but that would require the developers to make a demo. So that is why it's probably not going to happen. The money issue and other things like that. But I can see on your case when you were saying like the time and everything else, because that's the problem. Like this week, I haven't played any of the games I've been normally playing. I've been playing all these Steam Next Fest demos, and as a result, that's eaten up my free gaming time. So I can see that being a detriment as well.
I had never heard of this Akimbot game, but I actually just looked it up on Steam. Holy crap, they know that's Ratchet and Clank. It looks just like it. Oh my God.
It is definitely
Like,
that PS2 era because the protagonist, the main not Ratchet robot,
yeah.
he makes a bad first impression because his first lines of dialogue he says like "ch" every sentence. It's like man,
Oh, he's one of
this is
those
a
protagonists.
bad,
Okay.
but it gets better as you play. But no, it's like the gameplay was really good. The gameplay, no, granted, I've only played Ratchet and Clank 2016. I do not have experience with the rest of the franchise, but I liked this demo. So, hey, if you like that PS2 era platformer, Akimbot is highly recommended.
Yeah, I played Ratchet and Clank 2 on the PS2, and I've also played Ratchet Deadlocked on the PS2, which is it's sort of it's very combat focused. It kind of takes away a lot of the platforming from that. But I've also played the PS3 one, A Crack in Time. That one was really great. But it's really cool seeing we've kind of gotten to this new age where PS2, GameCube, Xbox games are considered retro, quote unquote. So now all of these indie developers who kind of grew up on that are trying to tap into that sort of
Yup.
nostalgia. And I think that's great to see because this is the stuff that, the GameCube PS2 era was really when I really started to pay attention to games. So seeing developers who kind of grew up from that same vibe approach that I need to check this out. This actually looks pretty on point.
I liked
Yeah.
it. I like that. Again, like this was a game I wouldn't otherwise have had much interest in. I would have like seen the trailer, watched it, shared it on my Discord, and given it no more further thought. But I was like, there's a demo, may as well give it a try. And now it's a desired day one purchase. Like I want to play more of this game. I want to see what else they've got.
Yeah, it's coming out in just a couple months. Holy
Yeah,
crap.
August 29th, the same day as Visions of Mana. But no, to your point there too, we do live. That's another thing about the indie scene where you have like, because I grew up on the Super Nintendo, so I love that kind of pixel art style and that kind of side-scrolling game style or top down. But you're right in that that used to be what indies were. It's like this is the art style of an indie game, and now we've reached a point where people that for them that foundational retro aesthetic was the PlayStation 1, they're making games. And then people that grew up on the PS2, the GameCube, and the Xbox, now they're making games. And you are able to find some of these lost genres. And it's like everything that you loved when you were younger can be represented. I think the pitfall is where people look exclusively at that AAA space. But I think, again, if I'm going to end this note on a positive for Summer Game Fest, when Jeff Keighley was classy in how he addressed the layoff situation, he made a point that we have so many indie and double A games that are doing really well and are really good. And at the same time, that's a lot of what he had at his Summer Game Fest.
Oh yeah, the AAA announcement seemed very sparse on that particular live stream that he did. So yeah, I think that we're seeing a lot of the projects that not only were probably turned out to be good, but the ones that really need that I think there was that they said it takes like I don't remember how legit this was, but there was like a huge sum of money that needs to be spent in order to get your trailer on Summer Game Fest. But I think that a lot of the studios that ended up getting exposure through Summer Game Fest are the ones that I really think will need it and the ones that really are going to be worth it.
And
So,
when you think about it, even at that price point, if that's the only ad money you've really got, you could pay more. I mean, we're talking like the Super Bowl is millions of dollars for
mhm.
an ad spot. So, the price, when you think about television and other big event prices, technically Summer Game Fest isn't that expensive. But if you're someone like EA or Ubisoft where you don't need Summer Game Fest, then you can save that couple 100,000, and in Ubisoft's case, save it for your own venue where you stream your own event, which you think is a bit more expensive, but at least gets all of their own games out of the way. But I think to finish things up, I mean that's our thoughts on Summer Games Fest for the most part. We talked about a lot here. Did you want to close out with another advertisement for your own channel?
Sure. Yeah, my channel is youtube.com/ at postmesmeric. Working on several projects. I also, have social media. I'm still, I guess, sort of begrudgingly on Twitter or X or whatever it's called. I do stream periodically on twitch.tv/ postmesmeric. And as far as, you can always go on the Patreon. There's a links to that on the YouTube page. I'm working on several projects. I know my upload schedule isn't the most consistent, but I try to take a lot of
Better
I
than
take a lot of
mine.
time. Oh, that's fine. I take a lot of time to sort of ponder the direction I want to take in certain things. I guess as far as just teasing what to expect, I kind of mentioned this earlier. I do want to do another sort of first time videos, kind of like the Dark Souls videos were. I do know what game that's going to be, and I think it's one that a lot of people are going to know and are going to appreciate. So look forward to that. I'm going to try and get it done by the end of the summer.
All right, I'm looking forward to it. I really enjoyed that Dark Souls one. It really that's the reason why I keep thinking maybe I should go back and try, but we might have to talk about that another time because I'm doing my own journey through some of these games, and I want to go back to Dark Souls 3. I want to try and at least play through Dark Souls 3 before I make a ruling on Dark Souls as a whole. But yeah, and of course, me as always, I might put up a Steam Next Fest video next week if I can. It would have to be really, really rushed. I got all the footage at least already, but I have to write my thoughts. I can't do a lot of drafts because I'm also behind on my Darksiders 3 video. But if I do the Steam Next Fest video, I'll then focus on the Darksiders 3 video in full. And, well, we'll see after that because I'll always be looking for opportunities for the Rambling with Ramble Pack podcast, of course. But yeah, I'm thinking I might need to rethink how I do videos. I think because the big deep dives might not be the best thing for me after all. We'll have to see. But otherwise, until next time, and remember, I got links in the description below. Go check out Post Mesmeric on YouTube, and I do have his Twitter down there as well. So check him out. Check out his stuff. I highly recommend him. Have a good night, everybody.